All right, everyone, welcome to Words of the Wise. I am so excited to have Sergeant Daniel Mee from Philadelphia Police Department with us today. He has over 23 years on the job, and wellness is something that is a huge focus for him, and I'm really excited for him to share his insights. So, welcome to Words of the Wise, Sergeant Daniel Mee. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, the pleasure is all mine.
I want to give our listeners some insight into who you are. How did you get where you are? How did you start in law enforcement? Where did you come from? Maybe give us a little snapshot of who you are as a person and how you got to where you are today professionally.
Absolutely. Well, I was born and raised in the city of Philadelphia. I'm a third generation police officer, so it's something that was in my blood, something that I always wanted to do. My grandfather was on the job. He was a lieutenant. My father was in homicide. He was a homicide detective. And I always knew that I wanted to be on the job. It was a lifestyle that was synonymous with who I wanted to be. I knew that there was going to be challenges, both personally and professionally, with that. Growing up in that type of environment, knowing the shift changes and the stresses that were involved with it, you know, sitting there at Christmas at dinner and having my father leave because, his pager, dating myself there, is blowing up because there's something going on. Not every family has that. And for me, it was always understood that he and my grandfather were out there running around doing good, for our community. And I wanted to be a part of that. So as I was growing up and got older, go to high school, and it was also something that kind of kept me out of drastic trouble, just like anybody else getting into stupid things. But it was always a guiding light for me to stay more or less on the straight and narrow because I knew that I needed to do that in order to accomplish my career goals.
That's amazing. And I want to say, to anyone who's listening who doesn't know what a pager is, it's a little
Yes.
device that you used to have that would
Right.
beep and it would have a phone number, right? And then you'd have to go and call them. That was,
And then you would call them back on the rotary phone that was actually connected to the house.
yep.
So it was strange times we lived in, but that's how it worked.
It's so third generation, you saw all of the challenges firsthand, but from a different perspective, from the perspective of a kid growing up. Was there anything that your family gave to you, or any advice that they gave to you, or anything that you learned from them before entering into law enforcement that maybe has helped you?
Yes. There was conversations would take place in our living room between, my family members about this. My uncle was also in the job for a few years as well. So it was always talked about. We talked about things that were going on in the community in Philadelphia and across the country in a different perspective than other people. Um, it was very often that we would be watching the news and someone in the house would say, that's not really what happened.
Mhm.
And things would transpire on the street and they would have to pretty it up for television purposes, and the nitty gritty of things that were taking place out on the streets was far different, far more dire than we were being led to believe. So that gave me an insight to exactly what was going on. Words of wisdom that my father gave me and his father gave him was the ethical side of things, right? Because you're going to come up against so many adversarial situations. Of course, yeah, people are trying to harm you. That's one aspect of it. That's, 5% of the time. The other 95% of the time, you are challenged through your own ethical and moral core values. And you better hold those dear to you. This is not a profession. You're just going to get fired. I mean, you get fired from the police department, that's a huge thing. More often than not, you're going to get arrested and locked up. And I know that that's hard to believe for a lot of listeners out there, but that is 100% true. I've seen many people walk away in handcuffs, and it's very disturbing to see that. My father told me, and his father told him, you're going to walk into a room, there's going to be $1 million sitting on that coffee table, and you're going to be all alone. Take $1, and you'll be looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life. And I've
Mhm.
always thought about that. And every single night when I go to sleep and I rest my head on my pillow, no matter what happened that day, the good, the bad, or the ugly, I knew that I was morally and ethically aligned with positivity.
I love that. And I think that those are great words of advice to stay true to who you are and make sure that you're doing the right thing. And I think that most people who are listening, like you enter into this career because you do want to help and you want to do the right thing. And, to say that you'll be challenged in that, and to choose the right path, I think is great. And it sounds like your family really set you up for success early on. And I also do feel like your environment matters and it shapes your perceptions of things. And so it sounded like growing up in that household with those perspectives, with individuals who did have a really good moral compass, it set you on that trajectory within your career. So what a cool blessing,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. I mean, you have to have those core values on this job. This is not something where you're just going to stray away and you can't make those choices in the negative fashion. It's not going to be good for you. It's not going to be good for your peers, your agency, and it's certainly not going to be good for your family. Nobody wants to see you get hauled off to a jail cell because you made a mistake of the heart. We all make mistakes of the head. Everybody makes mistakes every day, and I'm a sinner just like everybody else. However, there's certain things that you cannot do, and you cannot tarnish the badge if you would. That is something that is an absolute no-no in this landscape that we're in.
Yeah, I love it. And I also think it all ties into wellness because it's, you said this a couple times, like you'll be looking over your shoulder. You're not going to be able to, sleep well at night. And we know that this career has enough stress as it is, and cumulative stress. Obviously, you've experienced that over 23 years on the job. So I want to talk a little bit about wellness. How was the wellness landscape when you started this career?
Funny you say that. When I started the career, I got on in October of 2001. So I'm a 9/11 baby.
Okay.
Um, Getting in there it was a wonderful experience. Went through the academy. We were there for 9 months. I got in October and got out in July. And there was a lot of physical fitness, defensive tactics, things like that took place in there. You had to stay in shape. You were always working out, running, things like that. And that helped drive eating habits. I think it was a lot easier then because when you're in the academy, you're working Monday through Friday, you have normal hours, right? Just like any other job that you would have. So it kind of was an easy transition to go from, I was working in the corporate world and the IT world, and then navigating in there, I was 9 to 5. So lunches, dinners, breakfast, all those eating habits still remain true. Once you get out, now you're in shift work. For the most of us, we were going into patrol and we were going to go do shift work. So you might be working, 8 o'clock to 4 p.m. Our shifts were 8 to 4 and then 4 p.m. to midnight. And then there was a steady midnight shift. And the swing shifts were very difficult to start to get those eating habits down correctly and those physical fitness habits down correctly. And I was an absolute failure at that without question. Took me years to start taking care of myself in the right manner. I got married and she really kind of set me straight because my wife is very into health and physical fitness and things like that. So she drugged me along reluctantly as that may be, but going out and making the time to take care of yourself was so crucial and important. So you have a busy day. Everybody has a busy day, but there's 24 hours in that day. If you can't find 30 minutes to an hour, then it's time to make some life adjustments. We're all busy and that's wonderful, but you have to take care of yourself.
100%. And I would love if you could dive a little bit deeper when you said in the beginning you were a huge failure when it came to wellness. How did that impact your performance on the job or how you felt physically, mentally? Did you gain weight? Like, what did that look like for you? And then once your wife drug you to the other side, how did that impact your life? Like, did you see like a stark change between the before and the after?
Without a doubt. When I first started on the job, you're out there, you're running around, you're making arrests, you're going to court, you're going to work, and it's sort of this never-ending cycle of work. You get up in the morning, you go to court, you come back home for a minute, and you go back to work at night, whatever your schedule may be. It's not conducive to a healthy lifestyle. And I never made the time for it. I was a young guy. I was 25 years old running around. I felt healthy. I thought I was healthy. Um, After my wife introduced me to a bottle of water, right? So that I would start hydrating. That was probably the first step in feeling better. And I know it is hilarious, but it's absolutely true. She got me a giant blue bottle of water. It was like a gallon. Told me, you got to drink this every day. So I was forcing myself to drink this water all day long, where, normally I would just casually get a drink of water. Oh, I'm thirsty. Once I started doing that and just getting the hydration in my body, that was the first step for me to feeling better, because it was washing out everything else in my body. I wasn't drinking the sodas. I wasn't drinking any of those drinks that weren't good for me, but it starts flushing your body out. You start feeling wildly better. And then that transitions into doing other things.
And I think that that's such a positive message of like, it might sound simple, but it can have a huge impact on your life. And so I think sometimes when we think about wellness, it feels overwhelming and there's all these things that you can do. But if you could say, hey, like I just started drinking water and that made me feel better. And then I added to my wellness routine from there. But I think that's such a good thing to tell people of like, it doesn't have to be crazy or overwhelming at first. It's like small little things lead to big change and results. And I also think that, to your point, there are so many people that I run into too, where it's like when you're younger, that's the time to prioritize and be more proactive with your wellness. But there is this mentality of like, I'm invincible and I feel good and like nothing can get to me. And then when you get older, you're like, dang it, maybe I should have done those things when I was younger. So it's an interesting mentality to kind of switch. When you feel good, you want to start doing those things so that you can maintain that feeling over time rather than, regret it when you get older.
Yes, it's the baby steps, like you said. I mean, it's about those building blocks to your success, and wellness is a major factor in law enforcement's uh, in being successful in law enforcement. You have to be spiritually, physically, mentally aligned to do this job for the 25 years. If you want to get to that pension, you have to take care of yourself in every single aspect of it. And more often than not, we're neglectful of it. And little changes, drinking the water, going for a walk, get outside, let the sun hit your face. There's a lot of people that work midnight shifts and they're essential vampires. They never see the light. Mm-hmm. You got to get out there and get that sunshine on your face. Simple changes will have dramatic effects on your life.
100%. I completely agree. So you come from a really large organization, maybe one of the largest organizations in the country. And we know that there are challenges that come with, creating a culture of wellness within a large organization. How have you seen that over the years? And what do you think are the biggest challenges for trying to create that culture within such a huge organization?
Culture is the key word there. It's every single aspect of what we do in law enforcement. It's our police culture, and that needs to change. It's slowly changing over time, and things like wellness being incorporated into our lifestyle is one of those essential components that's starting to get recognized, not only from the leadership standpoint, but also from the officer standpoint. You can have top level executives that are going to go out there and say, hey, we have this, that, or the other thing as far as they can help you out in your life. But if the officers aren't adopting it, it's really not going to go anywhere. So what I would say to any of your listeners out there is to say, do it. Get up and start following the program that your agency is offering to you. Whether it's for example, in Philadelphia, we have an EAP program, the Employee Assistance Program. That's for anybody that's feeling challenged, might be, feeling a little bit down and out or what have you, experienced some horrible things. The current stat is like something like 800 traumatic events happen to officers in their lifetime when a civilian would experience maybe 5 to 10. That's a wild statistic that I never even really thought about until a few years ago when I was doing some research on the subject. And I said, oh, it explained a lot of behaviors that you see in our industry. So when you talk about wellness and our lifestyle, peer support things is another thing that is really blown up in the past couple of years as well, where you can actually have conversations with other officers, whether it's in person or anonymously. That's all depends upon individuals seeking the help. So you can go that route as well. I could tell you from the beginning of my career, we didn't really have any of those programs available. I mean, we had some, but nobody really utilized them. It was still that old mentality. And one thing that I cannot stand in my career, and I hope nobody does this in their life, if there's one thing you can take away from anything that I have to say is the way we've always done it. That doesn't work. Stop banging your head against the wall and expecting different results. Try something new. There's other flavors out there that might lead you to avenues of success.
Yeah, and I love that you said that because I do think that, you know, you do need to think outside the box a little bit sometimes. And I think that it's twofold, and I'd love to ask you a question about this, but I think it's twofold. It's one, the organization providing resources so that employees feel like they have something available to them if and when they need it. But then what you said is so true. You have to take responsibility and accountability for your own wellness as an individual. And if an agency is going to provide these things, then you have to be able to take advantage of those things, and I think so often what I've heard, and I don't know if you've heard the same thing, but that expression of like you can only lead a horse so far, but you can't make them drink kind of thing. But then you hear on the other side, everyone's like, well, like our agency doesn't do everything. And so if they're not going to provide this for me, then like I'm not going to do it. So I think that it's a partnership in that way. How much of creating a culture of wellness do you feel like is on the organization versus on the individual? Do you think it's a 50-50 split, or do you feel like one has more responsibility than the other?
It's an excellent question. It's absolutely imperative that every single law enforcement agency out here adopts some type of wellness program for your mind, body, and spirit. That's not even up for debate. And you could get into the finances of things and challenges that comes with. I don't care. I don't care how much it costs. This is the United States of America. We're the greatest nation of all time. We have plenty of money here that can be allocated to the health and wellness of our officers. So I can gripe with the best of them, but I've never griped without coming out with some type of solution. I'm a
Mhm.
solution-based type of person. I'm also a personal responsibility individual. I've done wonderful things and I've done goofy things, and I've taken accountability for both. And I don't have a problem with that. Every day when I wake up and I'm sitting there and brushing my teeth in the mirror, I'm planning out my day. What successes do I have? What challenges are out there? How can I make my life better and the lives of the people around me better? And at the end of the night, when you're going to bed, you're brushing your teeth again. What did you accomplish and what do you need to work on?
Mhm.
So I would say to answer your question is the agency, it's a must. So it's 100% the agency has to provide that. If your agency isn't providing that, then it's the job of the officers to start pushing up and saying, we need this to be provided. And that goes, and we could throw the unions in there as well. I've been a union guy for 23 years, and generally speaking, my union has done a good job of introducing those aspects of our lives. But the ultimate responsibility is on you, the officer, the individual. You are the one who is living this life. You are the one who is feeling a certain way, whether it's good or it's bad or somewhere in between. You are the one that has to pick yourself up by the bootstraps, and you're walking your life. Do you want to make your life better or worse? Are you willing to change? Are you strong enough to change?
Yeah, I love it. I think that was a great answer. And I think you're 100% right. I think that it is on both sides. And if your organization isn't providing those things for you, then what can you do to make it happen for yourself or to make it happen within your organization? I love that. I think it's great. So we know that staffing right now is a challenge, and we talked a little bit offline, and you're very similar to a lot of the larger organizations out there with, staffing numbers and being short-staffed. how have you seen that impact mental health, as of recently? Because we know maybe this has been happening, what, the last 5 years-ish?
Yes, I would say the past five-ish years. I would say that, I mean, this has, I mean, the elephant in the room is 2020. You know, the protests that went on, no matter where you fall on the political spectrum, they happened. The reaction of some agencies was positive, some was negative, but ultimately, if you're not changing or adequately providing services to your officers, what are we doing out there? You need to make your agency extremely attractive. How do you do that to a younger generation? I'm a Gen X guy. I'm probably the last of the folks that are going to go out there that are going to say yes sir, no sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, when somebody gives me an order. I'll gripe about it. I don't have a problem doing that. But, generally speaking, I'm going to do it as long as it follows ethical and moral guidelines. The younger generation, and I'm dating myself with that one as well, they want to know why we're doing something. And when I made sergeant in 2018, there was a lot of questions that were coming from younger officers. And at first, I looked at them and because I said so. And then I changed my way of thinking very quickly when I was talking to a group of people that were in their early to mid 20s that did not understand how I was communicating with them. It was my responsibility as their supervisor to change my mentality to fit in a communication pipeline for them to understand what I was trying to get them to do. So simply put, you want to be able to educate your officers that are out there and give them the tools that they need to succeed. And wellness is a huge component of that. And
I
retention and recruitment will follow if you're doing that. If you create an environment where this younger generation is going to say, okay, I like what they're doing at this agency. I say a lot often now, there's a police-free agency that's going on out here in this country where officers are able to go from one agency to another at the drop of a hat. Where in my day, when I signed my name in proverbial blood with the Philadelphia Police Department, I was going to be there forever. Just like my father and my grandfather. This generation has a completely different look at it. They're looking at it as a free agency. What can the agency do for me?
100%. And I've had a lot of conversations recently around that about how, because it's so competitive right now, and a lot of agencies are essentially duking it out. They're like fighting against each other for recruits. And I've heard stories of neighboring cities going into other cities with their recruitment trucks and parking them there or putting up billboards in different cities to like try to draw people in. And everyone's essentially fighting over the same pool of recruits. And so wellness has become a part of that hiring process of saying, hey, like, you know, maybe the pay isn't the same. Maybe one agency is more competitive pay-wise, but they don't have any wellness resources. And so we're seeing, or at least I'm hearing that, recruits are saying, you know what, I'll maybe make a little bit less if I feel like they're going to take care of me and, my wellness over time. And then the flip to that, what I'm hearing through other leadership is once they have established a wellness program in their agency, they're retaining staff because they don't want to leave and go somewhere else because they feel taken care of. So I do agree it's twofold. And the point of like aging yourself, I think it happens so fast. And I have felt something very similar recently where I'm like in a room with, recruits or even at agencies when I go and work in person sometimes, there'll be someone with a tattoo that says like 2001 and I'm like, oh no. I ended up being like mom and it just happened overnight. But I think that I think that asking why isn't a bad thing. I think that you have to be respectful, obviously, and I think that you need to, be able to do your job in the way that, is expected or required, and be have respect. But I also think that challenging that this is how we've always done it, could also be a positive thing of saying, why are we doing this? And I think that when you can attach to a why, a lot of people can get behind the mission if the why makes sense. And that's another conversation we've had recently, is, you know, maybe leading with why we're doing this, rather than like what we're doing, why we're doing it, and using that to create more buy-in. I'm curious to know, when we're on the subject of why, was that a part of your training when you were in academy? Did they connect you to a why, that you're doing this job, or was there a specific why that you've had over the last 23 years that's kept you, um, moving forward and kept you in this career path?
Good question. The why when we were in the academy was really, it was community focused. It was, you're doing this job that not everyone gets to be able to do. Uh, the standards were strict, and you had better fall in line with what those standards were. And helping and being able to help out your community at such a granular level where you're really engaging with people on a daily basis. I was spent my entire career in patrol. I loved it. I was answering 911 calls every single day. And, in 19 of those years was in a extremely high crime area. And you get to know people that are in that community that are seeking your help. A lot of these communities are plagued by that one house on the block. There's 100 houses, and there's that one family on the block that terrorizes everybody. And you get to learn who you are. And the academy does set you up for that type of mentality. Over time, the why has gotten stronger with me in some aspects and a little bit weaker in others. I've always wanted to help people, and I will continue to do that throughout the remainder of my life. It's just something that I enjoy doing. I guess that might be a selfish factor for me because I feel good when I'm helping people. Um, I, I get, I, I get, I start to question things that start happening when we start seeing things that are going sideways in the law enforcement industry, and I'm seeing a lot of ideas being thrown out, but not a lot of traction or teeth behind it. You know, if you're going to recruit officers and retain officers, like you said about wellness programs, this is at a financial level, at a manpower level, it's very simple to do. You sign on for a program, you get these folks in there. It shows that you're an agency that cares about individuals. Again, it comes back to the free agency thing. If you don't take care of your people these days, they're going to walk away and they're going to go somewhere else. And as a funny example to that, I had one officer years ago that came to me and said, "Oh, I'm going to try to go to another agency." Okay, go take the test, and went over, took the test, and he came back and he said that there was police chiefs lined up around the entire room like it was the NCAA or the NFL combine for football players. They were checking everybody out and seeing what they were doing, and they were doing PT and athletics and taking tests and all kinds of stuff. He said it was exactly like that, and that's to what you were saying earlier. To your point, that's what it's turning into. I mean, these chiefs are turning into general managers in a sports arena where they're drafting people essentially to their team. So who's got a better facility? Who has better equipment? You know?
Interesting. Yeah, that's so interesting. I've never heard it put that way before. And I've actually never heard of that, of all leadership in a room scoping out potential hires.
That is a fact.
Interesting. Okay. So, what do you do? You've been on this job for 23 years. It's a long time, going on 24.
Going on 24.
What do you do for your wellness now? So, I know that your wife heavily influenced your wellness. She got you drinking water. It's a good first step.
Good first step, yes.
What have you done over the years for your physical and mental health that you have found to be the most effective with cumulative stress and staying, healthy and on the job this long?
Sure. Well, one of our things that we love to do in law enforcement is to eat junky food That is 100% true. That is not a myth or urban legend. That is true. We eat junk food and we drink too much. Those are two things that we do. And I was absolutely indulging in both. So you say, okay, well, what am I going to do? You got to cut it out. I mean, you don't eat McDonald's every day, and you don't need to be drinking to excess. Cut those things out and down, and then you start feeling healthy, just like, with the example of the water. You start phasing those things out and start introducing a healthy diet, a healthy lifestyle. Don't buy these products when you're going to the grocery store, and make better selections when you're going there. If your grocery store doesn't provide you with healthy food, then why are you giving them money? Go pay the money to go get healthy food, farm fresh food. I'm blessed that I live in a community now where there's a lot of farms out here where they have, it's literally farm to table when it comes to meat and vegetables and things like that, which is easy for me. But when I was living actually in the city, it's a little bit more challenging, but you can find those things out there. The other thing to do is to get up and move. I wasn't very much into exercising or anything like that. I mean, when I was in high school and, college, things like that, you're running around, playing sports or whatever. And then, of course, in the academy, you have to train to make sure that you're reaching those milestones. But then after that, it dissipates. I don't have time to go for a jog, or I don't have time to go exercise or what have you. So you have to make those specific decisions, things like waking up and actually stretching, doing yoga in the morning or whenever your shift, when you wake up, do that. I started doing that, and my mind was clearer. That morning fog goes away. I'm an absolute passionate coffee drinker. Probably too
Same.
much. I could probably cut that out, right? Another vice. But one thing I learned is, when you wake up in the morning, you start chugging that water. You don't drink that. Don't take those caffeinated beverages for an hour or so after you wake up. You don't need the coffee as soon as you roll out of bed. Get up, get in the shower, start exercising, have your coffee with your breakfast or whatever. And your breakfast doesn't have to be something insane, but it has to be something healthy. You don't, fruits and vegetables are actually something that you can throw into a bag and bring to work. Recently, I was eating a ton of kale and spinach, and boy, did they rake me over the coals about that. But honestly, it made me feel good, and it was a deliberate act that I did to make sure that I was consciously making those decisions rather than getting the easy cheeseburger. It was a challenge to myself, and it wasn't easy, but it certainly made me feel better.
100%. And I think too, like, it goes back to what we said before. It's not going to be easy, especially when you're in the habit. Like, building any new habit is always going to be a challenge in the beginning because you're not used to it. So if you're used to going through the drive-through every night and you're not used to bringing, a bag of veggies to snack on, then it's going to take time to build that habit. But I love that you kept saying, like, it's a conscious effort. Like, you have to consciously say, this is the new choice that I'm going to make every day. And I feel like you stared into my soul when you said, don't roll out of bed and drink coffee right away, because that is definitely something that I do. And I know it's something that I shouldn't do. But it's my habit. It's that thing where I'm like, all right, I'm going to roll out of bed. I'm not going to drink water. I'm going to go straight to my coffee machine. And so I think I'm hoping that these conversations are reminders that you don't have to be perfect. Things take time. And again, small conscious efforts over time lead to healthier habits, and then they create that longevity in your life. And I do think that nutrition is a non-negotiable. Like, and again, you're not going to be perfect. Every once in a while, if you want to go through and have a cheeseburger, like, I think for me, at least, my opinion is that's okay, in moderation. But I think that nutrition is so important. You touched on, you said clearing the fog. And when you said it in the context of movement, and I think that people severely underestimate the power of movement and physical exercise, even if it is just getting up, going outside and taking a quick walk, and not sitting all day. We talked about this before the podcast, how bad sitting for long periods of time is and on your physical and mental health. So I love all of that advice. my question to you is, what if someone comes up with an excuse and is like, I don't have time, or
Sure.
whatever that we know that there's hundreds of excuses. What would your advice to someone who's like, like I don't have time or I don't have XYZ, excuse?
There is no excuses in our industry. You wouldn't have an excuse if we were running into a house that was an active shooter and somebody was shooting. You wouldn't have excuses then. You'd run in there and go handle business. But then you're going to have an excuse on what? On going to the range and practicing your firearms techniques. You're going to have an excuse about your wellness, about your health. No, we don't accept excuses. You can do the excuses all you want to while you're going for a walk. It's putting the pressure again. This is the self-assessment. This is the evolution of the police culture that is happening. The groundswell is there. Everybody can feel it. The management, the agencies, the officers, everybody knows. Everybody knows that the change is rumbling. People like yourself, and there's other voices in this sphere that are out there driving this home. And it is productive to get up and out of bed and get in the shower and start working out and doing stuff and simply moving, making those deliberate choices. So as far as excuses are concerned, we don't deal with excuses. It's unacceptable. I wouldn't accept excuses from anybody for doing anything on the job. I don't want to hear about your excuses. You can have an explanation. That's very different. And your explanation better be, you got hit by lightning. There's no reason to not be going out for a walk. You got 15 minutes, you got a half hour. Stop it. Put your headphones on and go out there. You're going to be listening. I would say listen to Paige's podcast. There you go. Put the headphones on and go out there and listen.
I love that. And I think I've been seeing a lot on LinkedIn, especially. I know that we're both like pretty active on LinkedIn, and a lot of people are coming out with similar messaging of like, you are responsible for your wellness. And, this one saying that's been going around a lot, it's like, no one's coming to save you type of thing. It's like, take accountability, take responsibility. Everyone has time. And I truly do believe that 5 minutes a day could change your life. And if you just start there, just something, super short and simple, whether like you said, a walk, a breathing technique, doing a little bit of mobility, sitting in silence, whatever you need to do, everyone has the time. So I love that. Like we don't take excuses.
No excuses. Get moving. Do something.
Yeah. And I also think to your point of what you said about how the culture is changing. And a lot of people are prioritizing wellness right now, which is a stark contrast to when I started. And I'm sure, I mean, obviously you can relate too. You've been doing this a lot longer than I have, but I've been in this wellness space, for 8 years. And 8 years ago was so different than it is now in a good way. We're having these conversations. Agencies are prioritizing wellness for the most part. Maybe not everyone's perfect, not everyone's on the same level, but I do think it's at least a part of the conversation. There's an awareness around it that didn't really used to be there in the way that it is now. But your environment matters so much. And the more people who are saying what you just said, like, no, there's no excuse. The agency needs to take care of their people, and we need to take care of ourselves too. The more people who get in line with that, the more positive the environment is for everybody else. If you, and you talked about this a little bit earlier, but if you're in an environment where everyone's negative, everyone's unhealthy, everyone's making excuses, everyone's just like, it doesn't matter, then that seeps into the rest of the organization. So the more people who can stand up and say, no, like my wellness matters. I'm going to take accountability and responsibility for it. I also expect my agency to do the same. Then I think the more we're going to see that like culture of wellness grow and the more buy-in and positive influence we're going to see over time.
Yeah, I mean, I remember my mother telling me when I was growing up, take care of your own little garden. That old, Buddhist proverb where you say, you take care of your own little garden. Don't worry about the other person's garden. You take care of yours, and then it'll cascade out to other people. And that's, I think, what we're talking about here. You have to take care of yourself, take care of your own little area. And once you do that, then there'll be buy-in from the other neighbors that are sitting there seeing your thriving garden, saying, I want to do what she's doing. And then you can start making those massive changes, which are coming. I mean, this year, the next year, the next 2 or 3 years is going to be a massive shift in this culture that we have in law enforcement, which is a pleasant, awakening for a lot of people that are here. A lot of the folks that are out there that are still doing things the way they used to do them, they are being, you know, uh, grown out, I guess. They're leaving the industry, and they're we're leaving their legacy there at the door. We're going to change things, and it's a must, because otherwise these folks aren't going to come into the industry. You have alpha people out there, men and women, who want to come into the law enforcement industry, but they don't want to join your agency if it's a mess. They're looking over at you, and you have low standards. You don't have good equipment. You don't have good training programs. You don't have anything going on over there. Why are they going to come over there and risk their life? The number one reason why, in communication that I have, and I can only talk to me, the number one reason why people are leaving industries is because they feel that their agencies don't care about them. It's not because of the people on the street or the stress you see on the street or the home life stuff. All that, they're all byproducts of the job. And most of us knew that coming in there. You knew that you were going to get banged around on the street and things were going to happen, sometimes horribly tragic. But you should be able to come back into your police station, your headquarters, your home away from home, if you would, and be sheltered from that outside world. You shouldn't come in there and then be beaten up more or neglected. And I think that that's a big part of the shift that's happening now.
Yeah. And I think that too, it starts with conversations. We talked about this before, like talking about this stuff is so powerful. And I agree, people want to feel like they're taken care of. I also feel like people don't want to be a statistic. I think everyone's tired of hearing all the same things, like all the statistics, and I think that the more we can talk about it, and all the things we said before, the more accountability on both sides, then the bigger the shift and the less likely people are to leave or become statistics. And I think that that's going to be huge. I mean, I'm looking forward to that. I want to see that trajectory. I plan to be here for a while, so I'm excited to see what happens in the next few years with wellness. I think that we're going to see a really positive shift.
Totally agree. I mean, it's not even that it's going to happen. It's how fast that development's going to take place and what a great impact it's going to have on the officers that are out there. And as those officers, those younger officers that are being impacted now, they're going to grow into the leaders for the future. So they're going to be the ones that are running the organizations. And I'm excited to see what they do in the next 5 to 10 years when they take ownership of these agencies and start running with them and having that ingrained in them that they have to take care of their people at such a high level because, as we talked about, I mean, you're talking about a free agency out there. So what are you doing at your agency to make it appealing to the next generation and subsequent generations?
100%. So a few last things before we wrap up, but I know we talked about this before, the why, and we said it in the context of your career. One of the things that I'm finding, especially with the younger generation, is when it comes to wellness, having a connection, a deeper reason why, and that changes for each person. And them using that as a motivation to prioritize their wellness. So, some people say it's job performance. Some people say it's their family, their retirement. Two-part question. How important do you think that is for individuals to connect to a why as motivation for wellness? And what is your why currently with your own wellness?
Awesome question. The first part of that question is, as far as why is it necessary to have your why? You could, because you have to be centered. You have to be focused. You can't be running around out here answering 911 calls and being all over the place and being scatterbrained. You have to be laser focused on your life so that you can help other people. How can I help you if my life is a mess? Right. And I'm not talking about, you're going to argue with your spouse or your kids or whatever. There's always going to be something going on in your life. But if you have your core values centered, if you have that architecture in your life that's set up to where you know what you're doing on a daily basis as far as your mind, body, and spirit, then every one of those life challenges that comes at you personally and professionally, you're able to navigate that because you have that structure in place to where you can tackle those problems as they come. My why, I could tell you, is very simple. It's my wife and children. There's no question about it. The greatest thing that ever happened to me in my life. I mean, it's just awesome. My core values are faith, family, tops in that order. So for me to be blessed, with such a wonderful family was fantastic for me. I smoked cigarettes for 25 years. I was a Marlboro Red guy, and I gave that up when I had children. I didn't want my baby girls smelling like cigarette smoke. And it wasn't even for anything other than that. It wasn't even for my health. It was for because I didn't want them, they're supposed to smell like babies. They're not supposed to smell like the Marlboro Man. So I gave that up. And it was challenging, but also fun and easy because I flipped it and said, how do I, how do I make myself a better father? Well, you do that by number one, staying alive and not smoking cigarettes and being a goofball, right? So quit that. And then also, you're investing in your children, the most precious resource that we have.
And I just had this thought while you were saying that because we were talking about this earlier. I think it's, when you're in the wellness space, but I think especially law enforcement, like it's so like most people I talk to, they get into this career because they want to help others. And when you're so dedicated to helping others, you often forget about yourself, right? It's easier to take care of others and then not take care of yourself. But when you flip it and you say, my why for being well is so that I can be there for my family, is so that I can protect them. I can be there for a long time. Like I want to be there for as long as possible and see them grow up and maybe eventually have grandkids. Who knows? I don't know. But like you want to be there for as long as you can. So when you can connect your why to where, hey, I do need to prioritize myself so that I can be there for others, whether that's your community, your team, your family. I think that's huge. And that's so important for someone to like flip the script in their brain of like, it's not just about helping others. Like, you can't help others if you don't make changes for your own wellness and help yourself.
The old adage in law enforcement is, you can't help others if you don't get to the fight. So that means, don't go driving your car lights and sirens 1,000 miles an hour in a crowded street, because if you get in an accident, you can't help me when I'm screaming for help on the radio. So you have to take your time, you have to navigate, and you have to and block everything else out and focus in, again, laser precision on what your objectives are. Is your objective to get there and help me out? Or is your objective to go as fast as you possibly can, go in Mach 5 with your hair on fire? Be focused on what you're doing and make those incremental changes so that you can see the monumental changes that come in the future, that come down the pike. And do it
Yeah.
for your family, do it for yourself, and do it because you're going to feel better. It's about living life at the maximum level. You want to be at 100%. Bring your A game. I don't need your C game. Bring your A game. Let's go.
Well, you're definitely inspiring me to bring my A game, and I'm gonna make some changes. I think tomorrow I'm gonna wake up and drink some water first. But last question for you.
Sure.
What words of wisdom would you share with someone who's younger in this career? Something that maybe you wish you would have known, or maybe you would have listened to. What words of advice would you give?
I would tell them to think of their future self more often. When you're making decisions in your life, specifically long-term life decisions, think of your future self. What is your future self going to say to you? Did you go back to school and finish your degree? Are you getting that? Are you taking care of yourself, as far as health is concerned? Are you doing deliberate things to improve your life? If you are, that's great. If you're not, it's time to do a self-assessment and reevaluation. Continually upgrade your life. We only get one go around here. You know, Turn off the television, pick up a book. You don't need to be sitting there incessantly watching the sports game. There's never been a situation in my life where any professional sports athlete cheered me on when I was chasing somebody down an alleyway for a gun. So things like sports, movies, they're there for your entertainment. They're not there for your lifestyle. Pick a book up and read it and start ingraining yourself in leveling up your professionalism. And it'll reap the reward because only have 25, 30 years in the job. It was a blink of an eye for my career. And as I see it dimming out in that world and moving into another one, it went by in a flash. I had a lot of fun. I wish I could have packed in a little bit more things, but at the end of the day, I feel that I set myself up for continued success into my later years in life. So just set yourself up for success.
I love it. Think about your future self. Like, would your future self be proud?
Yes, very much so.
I love
Very
it.
much so.
Thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate you being here. I want to give you the floor if there's anything else you think we missed, any final words that you want to share before we sign off.
I would just say, I mean, having the conversation with you is absolutely all my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It was a great conversation, and I hope that we can have more in the future. And as you said, these conversations need to expound throughout the industry and really across the world. I mean, there's other places where there, other industries need this assistance as well. And I think that starting off with law enforcement, first responders, your firefighters, and your EMTs, and military service members, that's we're expected to be physical in nature for ourselves. So let's set the tone. Let's set the bar really high for our other folks that are out there in the country and across the world. Let's go out there and kick some butt.
I love it. Thank you. And honestly, like the pleasure's all mine. I really appreciate your insights and, all the things that I mean, obviously wellness is something that's really a priority to you. So I really do appreciate you coming in and sharing that and taking time out of your day. I know you're busy. So thank you so much. And we'll definitely keep in touch.
Thank you so much, Paige.
Of course.